Right now, families around the world are celebrating Christmas. Children are opening presents. Parents are making memories. Homes are filled with warmth and laughter. But 80 years ago tonight, on a Christmas Eve just like this, 5 children went to bed excited for the morning to come. And by dawn, they were gone, vanished, as if they never existed. Christmas Eve, 1945. 5 children go to bed in their home in West Virginia. By morning, the house is gone, burned to the ground, and the children vanished. Not a single bone, not a trace of remains. Just gone. The parents spend the rest of their lives searching. They put up a billboard with the children's faces that becomes a landmark. They receive mysterious letters, strange phone calls, a photograph that arrives decades later claiming to show one of the boys alive. 80 years later, nobody knows what happened to the Sodder children. But the evidence suggests something far more sinister than a house fire. Because fires don't cut phone lines, fires don't steal ladders, and fires don't make children disappear without leaving a single trace behind. This is the story of the darkest Christmas in American history, and the mystery that has never been solved. December 24th, 1945, Fayetteville, West Virginia. It's Christmas Eve, and the Sodder family is celebrating. George and Jennie Sodder and their 10 children have spent the day preparing for Christmas. The older children help decorate. They've hung stockings by the fireplace, each one carefully labeled with a child's name. They've strung popcorn garlands on the tree. The younger ones wrote letters to Santa, and the house smells like Jennie's homemade Christmas cookies. There's a Christmas tree in the corner of the living room, covered in handmade ornaments the children crafted at school. Wrapped presents sit underneath, waiting for morning. The children can barely contain their excitement. In just a few hours, it will be Christmas. George Sodder is an Italian immigrant, a hard worker. He came to America for a better life and built a successful trucking business. He and Jennie have created something beautiful, a large, loving family in the heart of Appalachia. 10 children, a warm home. And tonight, Christmas Eve, everything feels perfect. The children go to bed around 10 p.m. They're told not to peek downstairs. Santa is coming. Tomorrow morning, they'll wake up to presents and joy and everything Christmas is supposed to be. But tomorrow never comes. Around 1 a.m. on Christmas morning, Jennie wakes to the smell of smoke. She hears crackling. The house is on fire. She screams. George bolts awake. Chaos erupts. They rush through the house, grabbing children, yelling for everyone to get out. The Christmas tree is burning. The presents are turning to ash. Smoke fills every room. For the children, make it outside safely. One of the older boys escapes through a window, but 5 children don't make it out. Maurice, age 14. Martha, age 12. Louis, age 9. Jennie, age 8. Betty, age 5. Their stockings are still hanging by the fireplace. Their presents are still under the tree, and they are gone. George tries to go back inside, but the flames are too intense. He runs to call the fire department. The phone is dead. He sprints to his trucks. He has 2 of them. He'll drive to town and get help, but the trucks won't start. Both of them, brand new trucks that worked perfectly the day before, dead. A neighbor sees the flames and drives to town to alert the fire department. But here's where it gets strange. The fire chief is home. He's been notified, but he doesn't come. He sent volunteer firefighters, and they don't arrive for 7 hours. 7 hours. While a family stands in the cold on Christmas morning, watching their home burn with their children inside. By the time the firefighters arrive, the house is ash. The sun is rising on Christmas Day, and the 5 children are gone. George and Jennie are standing in the snow, watching their home smolder. Their surviving children are in shock, shivering in the winter air. And somewhere in that pile of debris, they believe, are the bodies of their 5 babies. But when the firefighters sift through the remains, they find something impossible. Nothing. No bones. No teeth. No remains of any kind. Not even the metal eyelets from their shoes or the buckles from their belts. The fire chief gives his official statement. The children's bodies were completely cremated by the fire. The heat was so intense, it turned them to ash. George Sodder doesn't believe it. He's a businessman. He understands machinery, physics, basic science, and he knows that a house fire doesn't burn hot enough to completely incinerate human remains. Crematoriums use temperatures of 1,400 to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit for hours to reduce a body to fragments. House fires burn at 800 to 1,000 degrees. And even if the fire somehow reached cremation temperatures, which it didn't, there would still be bone fragments, teeth, something. But there's nothing, not a single trace. It's as if the children were never there. While other families are opening presents on Christmas morning, George Sodder is standing in the ruins of his home, realizing something terrible. This wasn't an accident. This was planned. So George starts asking questions. And the more he digs, the more wrong everything becomes. First, the phone lines. George discovers they weren't burned. They were cut. Someone climbed the pole outside the house and severed the wires before the fire started. Second, the trucks. George has them inspected. Both engines have been tampered with. The electrical systems were sabotaged. They were disabled deliberately. Third, the ladder. George kept a ladder leaning against the house. He tried to use it to reach the upstairs windows where the children were sleeping. But when he ran to grab it, the ladder was gone. It wasn't burned in the fire. It wasn't buried in debris. It had been removed. Taken. Someone carried it away from the house before the fire started. And then there's the fire itself. The fire chief said it started from faulty wiring. But George had the wiring inspected just months before. It was fine. And witnesses reported seeing something strange that night. Balls of fire. That's what they called them. Witnesses saw objects being thrown onto the roof of the Sodder house. Flaming objects that started the fire from the outside. This wasn't an accident. This was arson. Premeditated. Planned. Someone wanted the Sodder house to burn on Christmas Eve. And someone wanted those children gone. But why? Who would do this? Who would destroy a family on the holiest night of the year? Here's where the story gets darker. George Sodder wasn't just an Italian immigrant. He was outspoken, loud, passionate about politics. And in the 1940s, during World War II, that made him enemies. George hated Mussolini. He hated fascism, and he wasn't quiet about it. In a community with a strong Italian immigrant population, some of whom supported Mussolini, George's opinions made him a target. Months before the fire, a man came to George's door, an insurance salesman, but he wasn't there to sell insurance. He was there to deliver a warning. The man looked at George's house and said, "Your house is going up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed." George threw him out, thought he was just a lunatic. But now, standing in the ashes of his home on Christmas morning, those words echo in his mind. And there's another incident. A few weeks before Christmas, one of George's sons was threatened by another man in town, someone connected to the local mob. The man told him, "Your father's going to pay for the dirty remarks he's been making about Mussolini." George reported the threats to the police. They did nothing. So here's what George believes happened. Someone, possibly connected to the Italian mob, possibly political extremists, decided to punish him. They cut his phone lines. They sabotaged his trucks. They stole his ladder. They threw incendiaries onto his roof. And when the fire started, they took his children. Not killed, taken. Because if the children died in that fire, where are the remains? Where are the bones? Where is any evidence they were ever in that house? George hires private investigators. He contacts the FBI. He spends his life savings searching for answers. And what he discovers makes the mystery even deeper. A few weeks after the fire, a woman at a Charleston hotel, about 50 miles from Fayetteville, sees the Sodder children's pictures in the newspaper. She tells police she saw the 5 children at the hotel on Christmas morning. They were with 4 adults, 2 men and 2 women. Italian looking, she said. The children seemed scared. They weren't talking. They weren't celebrating. When she tried to approach them, one of the men blocked her and hurried the group into a car. The police investigate. The hotel confirms a group matching that description checked in on Christmas morning. But they paid cash, used fake names. No one can trace them. Then there's the sighting in Florida. A woman reports seeing 4 of the Sodder children, older now, but recognizable, at a diner in the 1950s. She's certain it's them. But by the time police follow up, they're gone. And then, in 1968, 23 years after the fire, Jennie Sodder receives a letter. It arrives just before Christmas. No return address. Just a photograph. It's a young man, maybe in his 20s. Dark hair. Strong features. On the back of the photo, someone has written, "Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie. Hello, boys. A 90132. Louis was one of the 5 children who vanished. The photo looks like him, or what he might look like as an adult. Jennie is convinced it's her son. She contacts private investigators. They trace the letter to Kentucky, but the trail goes cold. No one can find the man in the photograph. No one can decipher the cryptic message on the back. Was it really Louis? Or was it someone cruel, playing a twisted game with a grieving mother during Christmas? George and Jennie never stopped searching. They put up a billboard along Route 16, one of the busiest highways in West Virginia. It shows the faces of their 5 missing children and offers a reward for information. The billboards stand for decades. It becomes a local landmark. People grow up seeing those faces every Christmas season, wondering what happened to them. George dies in 1969. Jennie dies in 1989. Neither ever gets answers. But before they die, they make their surviving children promise. Never stop looking. Never stop asking. Never let them be forgotten. So let's talk about what the official story says. Because the official story is simple. Too simple. The fire chief ruled it an accidental fire caused by faulty wiring. He claimed the children's bodies were cremated in the blaze, completely incinerated. Case closed. Tragic Christmas accident. When George protested, when he demanded a real investigation, the fire chief doubled down. He said the heat was so intense, the bones turned to ash. He said it was impossible to find remains after a fire that hot. Except that's not how fires work. And forensic experts agree. A house fire cannot reach the temperatures needed to completely destroy a human body. Even in structure fires that burn for hours, investigators always find bone fragments. Teeth are especially resilient. They can survive even the most intense fires. But let's say, for a moment, that the fire somehow did reach cremation-level temperatures. Even then, there would be something. Melted dental work, belt buckles, shoe eyelets, the metal springs from their beds, jewelry. The children were wearing clothes. They had belongings. None of it was found. And here's the detail that bothers forensic experts the most. The fire didn't burn evenly. Parts of the house survived. Furniture on the first floor was barely touched. The stairs, where the children would have been trying to escape, were intact. Christmas ornaments from the tree were found in the debris, scorched but recognizable. If the fire was hot enough to cremate 5 bodies, why didn't it completely destroy everything else? The answer, according to experts, is that it couldn't have. The children weren't in that fire, but the fire chief refused to reopen the investigation. Why? Some believe he was paid off. Others think he was incompetent, and a few believe he was involved. Years later, a man comes forward. He was part of the volunteer fire crew that responded to the Sodder house, and he admits something chilling. The fire chief told him not to search too hard. He said the children were dead. He said there was no point wasting time on Christmas morning. But why would he say that? How could he know the children were dead before anyone even searched the debris? And then there's the evidence the fire chief buried. Literally, while sifting through the ashes, he claims he found a human heart. He says it's one of the children's. He tells George and Jennie it's proof the kids died in the fire. But instead of preserving it for analysis, he buries it. George demands it be exhumed. When it's dug up and sent to a pathologist, the results come back. It's not a child's heart. It's not even human. It's beef liver. The organ had been buried in the ashes, planted there, to convince the family the children were dead. Why would someone do that? Why would someone fake evidence unless they were trying to cover something up? The official story doesn't just have holes. It's a lie. And someone powerful wanted the Sodders to stop searching. So here's the theory that investigators and the Sodder family came to believe. The children were kidnapped, taken by an organized group, possibly connected to the mafia or Italian fascist sympathizers. George Sodder had made enemies. He criticized Mussolini publicly. He refused to support certain political groups in the Italian community. And in the 1940s, when ethnic tensions were high and organized crime controlled parts of Appalachia, that made him a target. The fire was a distraction, a cover story. Burn the house on Christmas Eve, make it look like the children died, and no one would search for them. Because dead children don't need to be found. But why take children? What's the purpose? Some believe the children were sold. Human trafficking was rampant in the 1940s, especially involving immigrant communities. Children could be taken and placed with families in other states. or even other countries, and no one would know. With no remains and no bodies, there's no evidence of foul play, just a tragic Christmas fire. Others believe it was purely revenge. The children weren't killed. They were taken and raised by other families as punishment for George's outspoken views. It's cruel, but it sends a message. Cross us, and we'll take everything from you. Even Christmas. And there's a third theory, one that's darker. Some investigators believe the children were taken for a specific reason. That they were targeted not randomly, but deliberately. Perhaps someone wanted one of the children specifically. Perhaps the others were collateral damage. This theory is supported by the sightings. The woman in Charleston said the children looked scared but unharmed. The sighting in Florida described them as healthy, well-dressed. If they'd been killed, there would be no sightings. But if they were alive, hidden, raised under new identities, the sightings make sense. And then there's the photograph. The one Jennie received in 1968, just before Christmas. If it really was Louis, then he survived. He grew up. He was alive, somewhere. But why send a photo? Was it Louis reaching out, trying to tell his mother he was okay? Or was it someone else? Someone who knew what happened, taunting the family during the Christmas season? The cryptic message on the back has never been deciphered. I love Brother Frankie. Little boys. A 90132. What does it mean? Is it a code? A location? A name? Private investigators try to trace it. They followed leads to Kentucky, where the letter was postmarked. But the trail went cold. No one could find the man in the photo. No one could explain the message. And that's where the mystery stands. Frozen in time. Frozen in that moment on Christmas morning when 5 children vanished. Here's what we know for certain. The fire was arson. The phone lines were cut. The trucks were sabotaged. The ladder was stolen. Someone planned this. Someone wanted the Sodder house to burn on Christmas Eve. And someone wanted those children. We know the fire chief lied. He planted evidence. He refused to investigate. He told the family the children were dead without any proof. We know there were sightings. Multiple, credible sightings over the years. People saw the children, or children who looked like them, in different states, with different adults. And we know the photograph. The one piece of physical evidence that suggests at least one of the children survived. But here's what we don't know. Who took them? Why? And where are they now? If the children were kidnapped, they'd be in their 80s and 90s today. Louis, if he's alive, will be 88 years old. Maurice will be 94. Are they still out there? Do they remember what happened? Do they know they were taken on Christmas Eve? Or were they told a different story? Were they raised believing George and Jennie abandoned them? Were they raised with new names, new families, never knowing the truth? Never knowing that somewhere, a mother and father spent every Christmas for the rest of their lives wondering what happened to them. That's the cruelest part of this mystery. Not just that the children were taken, but that they might have lived their entire lives not knowing who they really were. Not knowing that they had stockings waiting for them. Presents under a tree. A family that never stopped searching. The Sodder family never stopped looking. George and Jennie's surviving children carried on the mission. They followed every lead. They investigated every sighting. They kept the Billboard standing for decades, through every Christmas season, hoping someone would finally come forward. But in 1989, after Jennie's death, the Billboard was finally taken down. The family decided it was time to let the children rest, wherever they were. But the mystery didn't die with them. Investigators still study the case. Documentaries have been made. Books written. Because the Sodder children's disappearance represents something larger than one family's tragedy. It represents the failures of a system that didn't protect them. A police force that didn't investigate. A fire chief who lied. A community that looked the other way during the most sacred time of year. And it represents a question that haunts all of us. How do 5 children vanish without a trace on Christmas Eve? How does a house fire become a cover story for kidnapping? And how do people get away with it for 80 years? The answer is, they don't. Not forever. Because stories like this don't disappear. They echo through generations. They demand to be told. They refuse to be forgotten. And somewhere, maybe in the archives of an old mob family, maybe in the memories of someone who was there, maybe in the mind of one of the Sodder children themselves, the truth still exists. It's waiting, buried, hidden, but not gone. On Christmas Eve every year, people in Fayetteville still talk about the Sodder children. Some leave flowers at the site where the house once stood. Others light candles in their memory. Parents hold their children a little tighter. Because the Sodder case reminds us that Christmas, the night meant for joy, for family, for safety, can be stolen in an instant. George Sodder's last words before he died were, "Someone knows what happened to my children, and one day they'll tell." Maybe that day is coming. Maybe it's today. Maybe someone watching this, right now, during Christmas, finally has the courage to speak up. Maybe someone remembers something their grandparents said. Maybe someone knows something they've been too afraid to share. Because here's the truth. While you're celebrating with your family tonight, while you're opening presents tomorrow morning, there are still 5 children who never got their Christmas. 5 stockings that were never filled. 5 presents that were never opened. 5 faces that deserve answers. So before you click away, before you go back to your holiday celebrations, ask yourself, what do you think happened? Do you believe they were kidnapped? Do you think they survived? And if they did, why didn't they ever come home? Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they were told their family didn't want them. Or maybe, and this is what haunts me most, maybe they tried to come home and someone stopped them. Drop your theories in the comments. Share this story. Talk about it. Because the more people who know, the closer we get to finding the truth. And if you have any information, anything at all, this is your chance to finally bring the Sodder family the only Christmas gift that matters, the truth. Look, I know what you're thinking. You just spent 20 minutes on one of the most heartbreaking mysteries in American history. And now you're going to close this video, go back to your Christmas celebrations, and forget about it. That's what most people do. They watch. They feel sad for a moment, and then they move on. But here's the thing. This isn't just about the Sodder children. It's about the hundreds of other families torn apart during the holidays. Children who vanished. Truths that were buried. Stories of the world forgot. And while you're scrolling, while you're watching whatever the algorithm feeds you next, these mysteries are disappearing. Erased. Forgotten. Unless people like you refuse to let them die. So here's what I'm asking. Subscribe. Not for me, but because you care about the truth. Because you believe families like the Sodders deserve answers. Because somewhere out there, someone knows what happened. And the more people who see this story, the closer we get to finding them. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and let's uncover the mysteries the world tried to bury, together. Because if we don't tell these stories, especially during Christmas, when we're supposed to remember what matters most, who will? The Sodder children are still waiting, and so are countless others. Don't let them wait forever.